started specifically hunting down fantasy novels that contained elves because they are rather few and far between in the fantasy world today. And as somebody who grew up in a time where if you wanted to be successful in fantasy, you basically had to do a copy and paste of Tolkien's work, I kind of miss them. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy how there has been a massive boom in fantasy within the last 15 to 20 years, especially in the world of literature. We just have so much variety now, but let's not forget where we came from. So I've already made 2 videos exploring elves in fantasy literature. I'll link them below and also up here somewhere. Netflix figured out what I was doing, but suggested this movie to me. And I was like, an urban fantasy movie with Tolkien-like races set in modern-day LA? How have I never heard of this? And then I watched it, and I was like, oh, that's why. This movie's called Bright, and it's produced by David Ayer, the same man who thought that casting Jared Leto as the Joker and giving him a bunch of shitty tattoos was a good idea. Now, I know we weren't going to get a performance as outstanding as Heath Ledger's mythical incarnation of the Joker, may he rest in peace. So I guess we just had to satisfy ourselves with what we've got. Oh, hello, Joaquin Phoenix! By the way, that movie was made by the same man who made this.
Right in the nuts! That was beautiful!
So there really is no excuse. So Bright! The movie starts off by showing a bunch of graffiti art, which does a pretty good job of setting up the world we're about to see. We have orcs that are at odds with the police, the Dark Lord is going to come back, fairies are pests, elves are the elite. Then we get a scene with Will Smith playing a cop, again, and his partner, an orc, who is busy buying him tacos. Then another orc walks out of the convenience store opposite him and shoots him point blank. Then he wakes up in bed and this is his first day back at work since he was shot. His wife asks him to go outside and kill a fairy. Why she can't do this herself? I don't know, maybe because she's a nurse and she's sworn not to hurt living things. Yeah. So Ward goes outside and kills the fairy. 2 days later, Ward was helping his daughter Sophia change her bed sheets when he found a tooth under her pillow. He said, "Darling, why didn't you tell me you'd lost a tooth? I hadn't noticed." And his daughter answers, "Daddy, the tooth fairy was never gonna come because you killed her with a broomstick!" So moving on. Sophia doesn't want her dad to go back to work with the orc Nick because she's like, oh, the orcs are like slow and stupid and Mummy says that he's gonna get you killed because she's racist. Ward explains to her that orcs have their talents, same as everybody. But then Nick actually pulls up and he's like, how dare you come to my house? I don't want you here, because he also racist. And then Sophia comes out and now she's defending him.
Don't tell Nick to shut up. He's a person too.
So both characters have done a 180 in like less than 2 minutes. That's gotta be some kind of record. They drive Sophia to her grandmother's house, and when she gets there once again, she's like, I don't want you to go to work with Nick. Mommy says he's gonna get you killed. It's weird how this is coming from the mother and not from the child. It's almost as if racism is something you learn. So Sophia's on a 360 at this point. Ward gets back into the car with Nick and he puts some orc music on the radio. And it's a death metal song. Ward is like, nah, I don't want to hear some horrible orc music. Turn it off. And Nick is like, but this is one of the most beautiful love songs ever written.
That is one of the greatest love songs ever written.
Okay, that got a giggle out of me. Because, like, it's kind of true sometimes. Despite the aggressive nature of certain metal songs, there are some with surprisingly beautiful and wholesome lyrics to them. song in this scene, however, is Hammer Smashed Face by Cannibal Corpse, and it's not a love song. And Cannibal Corpse is one of those bands that is just pure evil. If you want proof of this, their vocalist, George Corpse Grinder, is notorious for winning plush toys from claw machines and donating them to children in hospitals. Just, you know, regular metalhead stuff.
Evil. Evil, pure and simple.
In this next scene, there is a lot of useless dialogue between Nick and Ward, and it's basically a giant info dump about Nick. Then they have to drive through the elf district, and the elves are all a bunch of rich privileged snobs with interesting fashion choices. Once they're at the station, Mustache Man number 1 badmouths Nick, saying, "Oh my god, we don't want him here. We'll support you if you want to write a letter to get him fired." Ward, once again, is defending Nick. So he's on a 360 as well now, I think. So Nick is the first orc to ever join the police force. And nobody trusts him because they believe that orcs put their clan lore above everything else, so they think that Nick helped the guy who shot Ward escape and that he's covering for him in some way. Nick and Ward then get called to a scene where this drunken dude is waving a sword around in the street, yelling a bunch of nonsense. When they get there, they meet the Sheriff Rodriguez. There's a thing about orcs and how much they suck, and Nick is like, "Why does everyone hate orcs so much?" And Rodriguez says, "Yeah, I get it, because, like, everyone hates Mexicans as well."
Hey, don't look at me, man. Mexicans still get shit for the fucking Alamo.
So there's good old human racism in this world as well, just to simplify things a little. So they arrest the drunken dude, who proceeds to throw up in the car. He starts spouting off at Nick in Orcish about how dark things are coming and Ward is more than he appears and the prophecy! Later at the station, Ward is washing the vomit out of the car when Mustache Man number 2 and 3 arrive. Seriously, what is it with this movie and dudes with moustaches? Now, I feel very strongly about facial hair on men, and a moustache is something you really need to be able to pull off. Will Smith is allowed because it actually looks good on him. And our ultimate lord and hero for moustache wearing is, of course, Tim Rossum. This guy looks like Borat. Ward even makes a joke about this, telling him to shave off his moustache. Ward be looking good with the upper lip hair, and he knows it. What was I talking about? These two guys give Ward a listening device and ask him to try and get Nick into admitting that he let the orc shooter get away. And Ward's co-worker, like, literally blackmails him into doing this, threatening him with his job if he refuses. Like, they really want to get this dude fired. I find it really weird how they're always banging on about how they've got no money in this movie and they're not getting paid enough, yet they have clearly enough money to pay these two dudes to spend an afternoon to go and measure a ladder, all in the purpose of getting Ward fired. Okay. Then this character appears, who deserves an award in the Getting Out of Cars Championship. Like, seriously, look at this. He's played by Edgar Ramirez, who I honestly didn't recognise. So, as I have previously established, I have strong feelings about men's facial hair. Edgar Ramirez belongs on a list of actors who should not be allowed to appear on screen without a beard. And in case you're wondering, Pedro Pascal and someone who is actually competent at writing urban fantasy, Luke Arnold, are also on that list. So these two guys are from the FBI and they've come to interrogate the drunken dude who apparently is part of this organisation called the Shield of Light. What is the Shield of Light? What is its purpose? Get used to not having answers. So we get them showing him some photos of a couple of elves called Layla and Tika, and we learn that Layla is going after Tika because Tika's got a magic wand. The drunken dude informs us that only brights can use a magic wand, and in order to find out if you're a bright, you have to touch a magic wand, and if you're not a bright, you'll disintegrate. He says that the Dark Lord is gonna come back. How does he know this? Don't ask questions. So these FBI dudes are part of an organization called the Magic Task Force, and their job is to eliminate any magical artifacts and control magical people, I guess. But the Shield of Light dude tells them that the only way they're going to stop the Lord of Darkness is by using magic, which he doesn't actually know how to do because he establishes that he's never touched a wand, but he would like to if he had one in his possession. He then tells them that the Shield of Light are going to stand against the Dark Lord when he comes back. So, if the Sauron equivalent in this universe returns, who are you gonna call?
Dave, the magical cheese wizard.
Be afraid. Be very afraid. Then Ward tries to get Nick to admit to what he did, but they get called away. And oh my god, is something actually going to happen in this movie? It's been 30 minutes! Oh, shoot out! Shoot out! Finally, some action! So they get called away to this weird building because there's been some kind of disturbance, then there's a shootout. And when they get inside, they find a bunch of weird bodies lying around and an elf with a magic wand, who appears to be Tika from the FBI agent's photos. Nick tries to communicate with the elf, but she only speaks Elvish. Ward, meanwhile, calls for reinforcements, and when his fellow officers arrive, they be wanting the wand. They'd be like, yeah, we're gonna take this and use this, and we're gonna kill Nick. And Ward's like, yeah, I'm not okay with that. But they're like, well, if you're not okay with that, then we're gonna kill you as well. Ward's really got, like, the worst colleague. Like, I've had some shitty colleagues in my time, but these dudes take the cake. Like, forget the cake, they take the whole bakery. We established earlier on that if a non-bright touches the wand, they will explode. Just let them touch it and see what happens. Ward goes outside and starts something with Nick, accusing him of, like, letting the orc go and this again. And then he turns around and shoots his colleagues because he doesn't want to shoot Nick. Like, in the middle of the street with people watching from their windows. And then a bunch of gangsters arrive because they also want the wand. And they also can't use it, so again, just let them touch it and see what happens. Then we get a car chase where it is established at length that the doors and windows of the car are bulletproof. As a car body worker, I can tell you that police vehicles' doors are usually reinforced with sheets of lead, and the windows are reinforced with plexiglass. At least that's the way it works in Europe.
Just FYI.
They manage to lose the gangsters, and then Tika starts yelling something incomprehensible from the back of the car. This reminded me of a scene from a Luc Besson movie. I'll get back to that. Then the car crashes into a barrier of nothing. So as I've established earlier on, I am a car body worker. And in my professional opinion, it's fucked! Then we get to see the famous Layla, who is not as good as getting out of cars as the FBI dude. She arrives at the scene where they found Tika. So earlier on, Nick called reinforcements, telling them that there was 4 cops down. So why has no one arrived yet? Then we get this shot with a dragon in it. Just flying casually above LA, just like that, just free to fly around. Why is there a dragon? Nobody's mentioned dragons. Like, what is going on? What? And are they like freight dragons, like they use in the Temeraire series in the USA? What is going on?
I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying.
Now Ward and Nick are on the run from the police, the gangsters, and Layla's group of elves known as the Inferni. We learn that the reason the car smashed into an invisible wall was because the wand wants to get back to its original owner, Layla. How this works exactly, like how one actually establishes ownership over a wand. As I said before, just don't ask questions. They get found by the gangsters, who actually do pick up the magic wand this time, and we get to see what actually happens when somebody does. Don't touch it. Just don't. Then the feds arrive on the scene where they found Tika, and the blue elf explains that he's been hunting Layla for 20 years. Earlier on during the interrogation, his sidekick explained that they were like, their job was to hunt magic and magic users, and they were very good at it. Not that good at it then. Like, 20 years? I know that, like, elves live for a super long time, but still, 20 years is a lot, dude. Ward, Nick, and Tika end up hiding in a strip club. Tika is having the time of her life and starts dancing along with one of the strippers. Which reminded me of another scene from another Luc Besson movie. Starting to see a pattern emerging here. Anyway, the gangsters arrive and the head gangster, Poison, tries to negotiate with Ward because he still wants the wand, despite the fact it literally disintegrated several of his men. Yeah, like, dude, you can't use it. He makes a whole thing about how he wants to be able to walk again because, like, he's in a wheelchair. This scene is just way too long. Like, what, am I supposed to feel some kind of sympathy for this guy? Dude's a gangster and a pretty violent one. The reason he's in a wheelchair is probably because he did some shady stuff. I don't really feel sorry for him, so why are you bothering with this scene? Anyway, then the Inferni arrive and shoot everybody. I mean, there's some pretty cool fight scenes here, and there's a scene where Layla, like, runs across the stage and then throws herself through a glass window. That was pretty cool. Like, the Inferni got some good moves, I'll give them that. Ward, Nick, and Tika manage to escape, but apart from them, they kill everyone, including the people from the LAPD. They hide in a gas station, and Nick tells Ward about how he grew up in between two worlds, being an orc raised in a human community, kind of like a child expat, being like a part of two worlds but not belonging to either. He says that he wants to be a police officer and do good because orcs sided with the Dark Lord 2,000 years ago and they're still getting the blame for it. They have a conversation about trust, and Ward calls Rodriguez. Rodriguez calls the blue elf dude, and Ward negotiates to get the charges dropped against him for killing his fellow officers. I'm not sure how anybody knows that he actually killed these people, because, like, no one was there apart from Nick and Tika, unless some of the witnesses or the gangsters told them, but that's never established. Nick called it in, saying that they had 4 police officers down, but he didn't tell them that Ward was the one that did it, so how do they know? While this phone conversation is going on, Layla and her team are tracking them, and they manage to pinpoint their exact location, which the FBI dudes considerably failed to do. This might be why you're having so much trouble catching her, blue elf dudes. They clearly have technology that is way more advanced than yours. So yeah, then the Inferni arrive and shoot Rodriguez. He was the only character I actually liked. There's a big fight scene in the convenience store where Layla rides a car, like, shooting at Ward down an alley.
Metal.
Everything blows up and then the feds just, like, arrive when everything's on fire. Like, you don't need to track them anymore. It's pretty obvious where they are at this point. Ward, Nick, and Tika escape again, but this time they get caught up by a bunch of orcs. Yeah, remember when they crashed the orc party earlier on? Turns out the clan responsible wasn't too happy about it. Ward goes off at them, threatening to arrest them all if they don't leave them alone. I mean, on whose authority are you going to arrest anyone? Like, literally everyone in LA hates you right now, including the police. They are all very clearly terrified by his authority. And then he calls one of them Shrek and tells him to go home to Fiona.
So I need you to take your fat, Shrek-looking ass back to your vehicle and drive the fuck home to Fiona.
So, wait, they have Shrek in this world? I have questions. So they get taken to this church where they meet the Orc clan chief. And by the way, can we just talk about this decor? Like, whoever designed this, I want your phone number. That is awesome AF. Anyway, the Orc clan leader goes off about how he used to live somewhere else and how all the races got on really well, and they used to have parties with elves and orcs and humans and dwarves, and you forgot about the centaurs. Don't forget the centaurs. They get left out way too often. And everybody got along fine, but then he moved to LA, and like LA sucks because like the elves are trying to take advantage of everybody. So they don't do that in other parts of the USA. It's just like LA. What is the lore of this world exactly? Also, dwarves. Do they live on the subway? Just asking for a friend. He also mentions that LA is the city of angels, which implies that this world also has a Christian religion.
Go.
Jesus.
Anyway, so he's like, yeah, fuck the police for coming, ruining my party. So he does these big parties, and he's like, all races can come and mingle. And the only rule is no guns. But who brings in the guns? It's the cops. Actually, it was the human gangsters that came in and really caused a ruckus. So why isn't he mad at them? Like, why is he only going off against these two random dudes that clearly can't do much on their own? Like, the logic ain't logicking. So yeah, Nick and Walt get beaten up a bunch, and similarly to the scene earlier on with Poison, I don't really understand what I'm supposed to feel for this guy. Like, the movie kind of sets up the orcs as being mistreated by the police. So what, I'm supposed to feel sorry for the orcs because they're being treated unfairly? But like, the only orcs we really get to see close up in this movie, aside from Nick, do really terrible things. Why should I feel sorry for this guy? So they crashed his party? Clearly they didn't know what was gonna happen. Poison and his gang probably did though. They're the ones the orcs should be mad at. But again, the orcs aren't mad at them for some reason. So the orc leader decides that Nick has got to die. So he asks his son to shoot him. So in this world, orcs gain respect by getting blooded. And it's established that this happens when an orc does something extremely brave. This guy claims that his son is going to get blooded by shooting a defenseless man. How brave of him. But he refuses to do that, and it turns out he's the one that Nick caught instead of the shooter who got Ward, and because he knew it wasn't the right guy, he let him go. So the kid refuses to kill him, telling his father that Nick actually helped him escape. His father is so grateful to Nick for saving his son that he shoots him in the chest, because he is so nice that way. But then Chica intervenes by extracting the wand from her skin and resurrects Nick, and then the orcs just let them go. Like, they were after the wand as well, but they're just like, yeah, you can go, it's fine. Like, what? Outside, Chica finally decides to speak English. She explains to them that she didn't do it before because she didn't trust them, which makes no sense. Like, whenever she was yakking off before, it was because she was trying to warn them that Layla was coming and they needed to move. Everybody's lives were in danger, and you could have warned them in a way that they would have understood, but you chose not to. Why? The logic, it ain't working for me. Ward gets mad at her and asks her why she didn't use the wand before, and she explains to him that she is only a novice.
I only started my training.
Apparently, bringing people back from the dead is something they teach to novice brights. What do you learn when you're more experienced? Like, this shit's terrifying. She also explains to them that the Inferni are trying to bring back the Dark Lords, to enslave everyone and, you know, misery and darkness and that. And that she used to be one of them, but she escaped. Okay. Using the spell has a really devastating effect on Tika, so they need to take her back to the place they found her, which is like where the Shield of Light are operating from, because there's like a magic pool there or something. What is this thing? How does it work? What's it doing there? On the way there, we learned that it was actually an orc that defeated the Dark Lord 2,000 years ago. And that apparently he, like, led an uprising against the Dark Lords. So, like, it was the orcs that brought him down from the inside. So, why is everybody mad at orcs then? Like, why are we only learning this now? When they get back to the Shielded Light place, turns out the Inferni are already there. They kill them way too easily. Like, we've established that these people are pretty awesome fighters, but yeah, just like a bomb and a gun is enough to kill them. Maybe they're just tired, I don't know. They shoot Layla, but then she comes back to life for some reason. Why? She just does. Like, don't ask questions. Then they have a fight with her, and eventually Ward manages to grab hold of the wand, hoping that he will blow up and blow everybody else up with him, but it actually turns out he's a Bright, because the prophecy! Layla has this conversation with Tika where she's like, you need to come back to the Inferni because that's where you belong. And Tika's like, no, I want to stay with these people because they're good people. How, when, and where did you come to this conclusion? Like, I can understand why she would think this about Nick because he's always been really nice to her and tried to protect her. Like, there's a lot of hugging going on between these two. But Ward? Like, she watched him shoot 4 of his colleagues, and I'm not entirely sure she understood why he did that. Like, Ward explained to Nick why he did this, but was Tika aware of their conversation? She was hiding behind a car when this was going on. Unless she's got, like, super good hearing, which is not established. Other than that, he's not a very nice character. So, yeah. Why does she think he's a good person? Because movie? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, he zaps Layla, again, way too easily. Zapping Layla sets fire to something. Tika escapes through the pool, just leaving her friends behind. Just, yeah. Nick runs out, but then realizes that Ward isn't with him, runs back into the building to save him. And then the orcs from the clan earlier on turn up, and they decide to blood him. 2 minutes ago, they literally murdered him. And now they respect him? Because he saved the life of the other guy they wanted to kill?
I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying.
At the end, the 2 of them receive some medals, and the movie starts the way it begun, with a fairy. 2 hours of my life I'm not getting back. This movie is a mess. And that's putting it lightly. It's kind of sad because the general concept is actually kind of good. In Tolkien's Middle-earth, after Sauron is defeated, the elves and the orcs leave, leading their world into the 4th age, the Age of Man, meaning that a modern day in Middle-earth would probably look a lot like ours, with just humans around, assuming that dwarves are now working in the subways. But what if they didn't leave? What if these races were still forced to cohabit all the way into a modern era? It's a concept that's worth exploring. This ain't it though. Like, the execution in this case is ludicrously bad. This movie tries to be way too many things at once without really committing to any of them. Like, this movie tries to make a point about social inequalities. The orcs are really hated because of something their ancestors did thousands of years ago, so they're treated like shit in society. But the actual orcs we get to, like, hang around, do really terrible things. They don't even have their own identity in this movie. Like, what is the difference between them and the gangsters? Apart from that they listen to death metal. There's a scene earlier on in the movie where orcs are getting beaten up. It's supposed to be like, boo, the police, it's so unfair, but we don't know why this is happening. Did they do anything? What's going on? Why am I supposed to feel sorry for these people? And why am I supposed to have any respect for this guy because he does such terrible things? Like, Why does Nick take the fact that this guy blooded him? Like, he's a horrible person. Why isn't he in jail after what he did? If Ward has so much trouble getting away with a crime that maybe no one else knows about, how is this dude getting away with this? And then there's the gangsters, which again, it's hard to tell the difference between these two groups. There is an argument to be made about disadvantaged and marginalized groups turning to crime in order to get financial advantage or some kind of control over their surroundings. But that's not what this movie is doing. It's basically, again, following the Lord of the Rings line with, here's a very powerful artifact and watch how it corrupts literally everyone who want its power for their own gain, even though there's more chance of it controlling them than them controlling it. Take all of this and boil it down to...
Make your dick bigger.
The point is there. Now let's talk about Layla. I saw an interview with Nomi Rapace where she said that she really liked her character and her way of seeing the world. It would be nice if you could share that information with us, like what she's trying to do exactly. We are told that she wants to bring back the Lord of Darkness. We don't know if that's actually true. She doesn't really say anything for the entire movie. All we get at the end is her saying this: I'm a warrior, I'm a priestess, a lover. I'm whatever my lord needs me to be. We never get a scene of her communing with the Dark Lord or communicating with him in any way at all. So what, is she actually communicating with the Dark Lord from beyond the grave? Or is she having hallucinations? Is she some kind of religious fanatic? Like, is the Inferni a cult that got a bit out of hand? This movie does way too much telling and not enough showing. So how am I supposed to take this character seriously? Like, she's very frightening, like she's got a few terrifying moves going on there, but that's it really. Like, I've watched this movie 5 times now and I still don't know what the hell her character's about. I want to compare her to another character from another fantasy movie who also happens to be an elf, Prince Nuada from Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. His character wants to destroy humans and restore his people, the elves, to their former glory. And we know that he wants to do this because he says so. He talks. And the movie shows us. He makes a speech at the beginning to a bunch of humans he's about to murder. He goes off about how despicable he thinks they are. He wants to awaken the Golden Army to restore his people and other fantasy races to their former glory. And he's willing to kill his own father to achieve this. He makes an appeal to his own people, telling them that humans have gone too far, destroying the forest with no regard for anything that lives there, building shopping malls and car parks in their place, temples to their own greed. We are shown this, that we see the elves and how they live. And even though Prince Nuada is the antagonist and a cruel character, as a viewer, we relate to him because, well, he's kind of got a point. He makes it clear to Hellboy that he will never stop. He will either get what he wants or he will die. And the music is sad when he dies. Like, something beautiful is leaving the world forever. Like, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army is by no means a masterpiece of cinematography, but it puts its points across way better than this one does. This is what Layla could have been, an antagonist with meaning. I want to talk about Tika for a second. So, as I said earlier on, I compared Tika to 2 Luc Besson characters, Lilu from The Fifth Element and Angela from, well, Angela. I have no idea whether Tika was inspired by Luc Besson female characters, but her appearance and general way of being would kind of lend itself to be that way. Speaking of Angela for a second, I'm not usually one for crazy fan conspiracies, but just hear me out on this one. As I have previously established, I am a Mylène Farmer fan. And Luc Besson actually produced a video for Mylène Farmer. And in this video, Mylène plays an angel who is sent to Earth by God in order to understand human behavior. She returns in minimal clothing, acting all slutty. In the movie Angela, Angela is an angel sent to Earth to put Jamel Debbouze's character back on the right track. She states in the movie that she actually chose a slutty persona. I believe that these two characters are one and the same.
What was the question again?
Tika! Yeah. The fact that she doesn't speak English for most of the movie, but then suddenly does at the end, makes me lean more towards the Lilu theory. Because for most of the Fifth Element, Lilu doesn't speak English. She speaks her own language. But even though Lilu doesn't speak English, she still has a rather integral role in the movie. She's able to track down the stones and knows how to guard them from Zorg. She has her own quirky personality and brings a lot of humour to the movie. She is genuinely a treat to watch. Mila Jovovich brings her to life in the most pleasing way, and she was only like 19 at the time. And when she does start learning English at the end, we get a glimpse of how profound she is. She truly is an iconic character. Tika is just there for most of the movie. Even her quirkiness, like being super happy to see the strippers dancing, it's kind of cute, I guess, but it doesn't really bring anything to the movie. Most of the time, because she just does this in the background. She's just like there while the rest of the characters are doing their thing. And at the end, when she does start making sense, it doesn't really make sense. Point of her character in this movie is to bring Nick back to life when he dies. Other than that, you can pretty much write her out of this. I thought Nick's character was kind of interesting. I particularly like the way that he explains he grew up between two cultures, not belonging to either of them. And as a child expat, I really related to that. I think they missed a trick with him. Nick is also rather socially awkward, which could be explained by the fact that he probably didn't have any friends when he was growing up, being an outcast, being an orc in a human community. He never learned how to interact with other people. Also something I suffer from, and because of that, whenever there's an aspect of social interactions I don't understand, and there's quite a lot of them, there is a certain category of people who just brush it off, saying, oh, well, of course you don't understand, you're from the UK, as if, like, we don't have social interactions in the UK. Like, this ideology very quickly falls apart if you start thinking about it for half a second, but despite that, I have had people throw this at me for over 20 years. The same people. Like, they never sat down and thought about it for 2 seconds. Despite that, his character's pretty awful. My god, he is annoying.
Jesus.
There is a way to work social awkwardness into a character that is funny and quirky. That's basically the whole of the Big Bang Theory. It really doesn't work with Nick. Like, sure, I relate to him a bit, but that's it. Now let's talk about Ward. Ward is also a pretty tedious character. Like, he really doesn't have a lot going for him. A lot of the stuff that happens to him is just, like, obviously circumstances beyond his control, so he is understandably bitter about them. It doesn't really mean that he has to take it out on everyone around him. The only interesting thing about him is his attitude towards Nick, especially at the beginning when he's kind of flip-flopping with his racism, trying to defend him on one hand, but also condemning him on the other. He doesn't mind that Nick could be in the police force, he just doesn't want to work with him. He doesn't want to be over-racist, but he also doesn't want to be over-tolerant. Why he has this attitude isn't entirely clear. Maybe because he's black, and because we know that human racism is also a thing in this movie. His people suffered the same, so he kind of feels for him. Will Smith is the only black character in this movie, apart from his neighbours at the beginning, but they only get like 30 seconds of screen time, so they don't really count. Aside from that, we don't really know how black communities live and survive in this world. Which brings me to my next point. What I said about the people who wrote this fantasy movie without understanding anything about fantasy. The dragon? Seriously? But aside from that, there's just a bunch of other stuff that was just thrown into here without any thought given to it. For example, the movie is set in LA, Los Angeles, City of Angels. The Orc clan chief brings this up. At the end of the movie, Nick refers to Tika as an angel, so they have angels in this world, which implies they have Christianity. Given the different races, how does that work exactly? Especially as the war with the Dark Lord they keep referring to took place 2,000 years ago, which is when Jesus would have been doing his Jesusing.
Jesus Christ. Yes, sir.
That doesn't mean that Jesus couldn't have happened in this world, but Christianity definitely probably would have a different face to it, considering that the Genesis and basic plot of the Old Testament would probably be a bit different from the one we have. In Tolkien's lore, there are gods that create the world. The elves worship the stars, but there isn't any kind of strict religion. So how does this work exactly? Or are angels a race in their own right? Then we get the Shrek reference. Like, seriously, what is it with Will Smith and the movie Shrek?
Listen, you was really something back there. Incredible. Are you talking to me?
A movie which is largely based on traditional fairy tales, which again probably would have a very different face to them in a world where elves and orcs and centaurs and dwarves and dragons are actually real. The problem with this is it feels like the fantasy elements of this film were more of an afterthought. Somebody wrote a buddy cop movie with a pseudo-social commentary aspect to it and was like, yeah, that's too boring. Let's throw in a magic wand and oh, elves.
What makes me kind of sad about this is actually a beautiful movie. Like, aesthetically, I mean, whoever shot this really did a competent job of it, and it makes me sad that everything else kind of sucks. Then there's the whole thing about the orc shooter at the beginning who shot Ward point blank. We never find out who did it and why, and yeah, like, just leave that plot point hanging right there with no resolution.
So yeah, this movie sucks. So if you're looking for actual competent urban fantasy telling with similar races to these, I strongly recommend reading the Fetch Phillip archives by our beard-wearing god, Luc Arnold. This series contains pretty much any fantasy race you can think of, and does a way better job at world building without any weird inconsistencies. Another series I recommend is The Mage Killers by Ben S. Dobson. A sort of modern universe where magic goes along with technology, which is pretty rare in these types of novels, but orcs and elves are also a part of this world. Also, give Hellboy 2 The Golden Army a spin. I've also realised that orcs are a race that gets even more neglected than elves. Which reminds me, I really need to read the Grey Bastard series by Jonathan French. So those are my thoughts about the movie Bright. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. Please leave me a like, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought. Well done if you made it this far. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.